Today on Locked On Women's Basketball, I'm joined by Terry Horstman of The Next, and we're going to get into everything Minnesota Lynx, their season last year, their offseason moves, and if we think they can return to the finals this WNBA season. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen of the day. And today's episode is presented by Gametime.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Chelsea Leite and I'm joined by Terry Horstman of The Next, who writes on the Minnesota Lynx beat in Minnesota, obviously. And I thought it would be fun to come on and talk today with him just to preview the Minnesota Lynx season. They had an incredible season last year that obviously ended in disappointment because they made it all the way to the finals and then lost in 5 games to the New York Liberty. Yeah, I mean, I have invested interest in the Lynx just given that Bridget Carleton is kind of like the cornerstone of Canada basketball right now and is kind of, you know, one of our best players heading into this next cycle. So I thought it would be fun to hop on with someone who knows the ins and outs of the Lynx. So we're going to get into everything. Thank you so much for being here, Terry.
Thank you, Chelsea. I'm really happy to be back on Locked On. It feels like a new WNBA season starting once they start asking me to come back on the show. So I'm really happy to be here and ready to get training camp started. Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't cover the training camp in person, obviously, because I'm in Canada. But yeah, it's an exciting time. I think it just gets. We were talking about this before. It's like nothing. You know, obviously we have March Madness going and then there's a little bit of a lull. Then the draft happens and it's so busy. Then there's a little bit of a lull again now. And then once training camp happens, it's just like boom, boom, boom. Then the season starts. And then before you know it, it's like playoff time. So the Minnesota Lynx, I think, are such an intriguing team for the past year. I mean, think back to like last season, we were getting into power rankings and ranking teams. And I think everybody probably slept on the Minnesota Lynx and like what their potential was for the season. They did sign a lot of free agents going into last year. Nobody really knew what the team chemistry was going to be like. Nobody knew, you know, how all the pieces were going to fit together. And then it just ended up being so much better than expected. So they end the season in 2024 with a 30-10 record, which after the Olympic break, I think they only lost like 1 game before the playoffs started. And so that like post-Olympic run, especially given that so many of their players had been at the Olympics, was incredible to watch. And then they get into the finals and you have Napheesa Collier playing at a MVP level. I mean, A'ja Wilson obviously, you know, ran away with the MVP, very deserved. But in another year, like where A'ja wasn't playing like the best WNBA season in history, it definitely would have been a little bit more of a conversation. And then obviously they make it to the finals. So given, like, I just want to know from your perspective, obviously being on the beat, like, as last season progressed, was there always an idea that this team could make it to the finals? Or was there a moment in the season where everybody just kind of looked around and was like, oh, like this team is good?
Yeah, it was kind of a little bit of both. They did have a lot of new pieces last year. And I'll just say in my power rankings, I did have them as 4th. The consensus around the league was 9. And if there are any brave power rankers out there and want to put the Lynx at 9 again, I think that it's the chance to do the funniest thing ever. But I think they were pretty undersold even in preseason. And, you know, they all mentioned that they had heard that noise, and whether that was needed fuel or they're going to be that good anyway, I think is irrelevant. But they were pretty good right away. And at the beginning of training camp, you know, any team in any sport, it's like the chemistry is great already. You know, we're really feeding off of each other. Just we've got a great group. And you know, when it's day 1, day 2 of training camp, you know, it's kind of like the first day of school. Like you haven't gotten homework yet. Things haven't gotten hard yet. It's just kind of fun to be around your friends. And everyone from Coach Cheryl Reeve and all the way down the roster, everyone was talking about the chemistry in a way that sort of you had to pay attention to. I think all of us who are on the beat like had multiple pieces written about that early in the process, because they seemed genuine in the way that they were building chemistry pretty quickly, and it clicked. They were pretty good right out of the gates, and then it was just kind of a little bit of, at some point maybe the other shoe is going to drop, someone's going to get hurt. Fee did get hurt, and they had a game where they lost a big lead to the Fever at home with a lot of Indiana fans in the house. That was, some adversity, but in games without Fee, they still went 3-2. And so if it's like that wasn't going to sink the season, it just kind of felt like nothing will. And I think when they won the Commissioner's Cup final in New York against the Liberty, I think that was kind of when, if the Lynx weren't on your radar as a contender, they had to be at that point. So none of it really surprised me. They stated that type of season as the goal, going forward from the jump. And so it didn't really shock me that they got there, but they still played at such a high level that it was like, surprise isn't the right word, but in awe is, probably better. They played some pretty awe-inspiring basketball down the stretch.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that shocked me last season as someone, not on the beat, but, observing, keeping a close eye, is that they had kind of been in a rebuild for the past few years. I mean, they had the number 2 pick not too long ago. They lost Sylvia Fowles a few years ago. Napheesa missed a year, for maternity and all of that. And then all of a sudden, they're just like back on top. They made a few good trades. They, really worked the draft in a way, get some steals in the second round, stuff like that. And it just like flipped so fast, which I think rebuilds happen a lot faster, in my opinion, in the WNBA, just because, it's so much easier to get a great draft pick, do some trades. There's like a smaller player pool. Everyone's so talented that you get 1 or 2 pieces and then you can kind of just rise above. But I mean, that playoff run from them and their post-Olympics, I mean, I think, not that this is how I judge everything in the WNBA, but we're at a point here in Canada where things are growing so fast. And I feel like it went from a point where like me and my group were obviously talking about the WNBA finals and everything because we just like it. But it got to the point where random people that I know don't even follow basketball at all were like asking me about, the Lynx and the Liberty and the playoffs and all of that. And I was like, wow, this is getting like really big. And of course, getting to see Bridget like perform the way that she did and really just have a great season. I mean, just kind of missed out on most improved player, had, despite the team's disappointing Olympic run, she had a great Olympic run just like personally by herself. And so, yeah, it definitely for me was a little bit of, okay, like I know Bridget's good. I know Fee's good. Like they had all of the pieces, but to see it all come together, I think was, I mean, again, you said it right. Like I wasn't surprised. It was just really fun. Like it was just, you could see that they all loved each other so much, which is one of the best parts when a team is just, there's so much chemistry. And, obviously Minnesota's always been a place where women's basketball is like celebrated. And, there's never been an issue bringing fans into the Target Center or anything like that. But to see it just like, hit that next level, get the national attention it deserved, get the international attention, was just really fun. So, yeah, I mean, I think once we get into talking about their off-season moves, not much has changed. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. When we come back, we're going to kind of recap the Lynx's off-season, everything that they did since losing the finals and, what their team looks like going into training camp. So stay tuned. This is Locked On Women's Basketball.
Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by SKIMS for Men. When I found out SKIMS was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've so often been called the Kardashian of women's basketball. So getting the opportunity to try SKIMS, knowing about their quality from friends and family, it lives up to the hype. I tried the boxer brief. It works really well with an active lifestyle, whether I'm working out or I'm just doing something socially. SKIMS boxer brief really works, stays in place all day. I cannot recommend it highly enough. go to SKIMS Men's section over at skims.com/LockedOnNBA, or check out that section in the SKIMS store. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop-down menu that follows. Again, skims.com now with SKIMS underwear for men.
There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment just feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be a part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when the demand is sky high. Prices on the app usually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Here's why I use Gametime. Last minute deals are so good. I mean, you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for not just sports, but concerts, comedy, theater, and the all-in pricing means no surprise fees at checkout. So what you see on the app is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so we are back here with Terry on Locked On Women's Basketball, talking all things Minnesota Lynx. So we got into last season. Let's talk about the offseason. So this WNBA offseason was bananas in general. So we get it went from the season ended. The first big thing that happened was the expansion draft for Golden State. They do that. And then free agency is a few weeks later. That is wild. And especially because all of these players are signing 1-year deals going into the CBA expiring next after this season. And then you have trades going. Like, I feel like the trade market was just bigger than it ever has been in the offseason. And then now we just had the draft. So the offseason now is coming to a close. The Lynx were active, but definitely not as active as other teams. They retained most of their players. I think the biggest core player that left was Myisha Hines-Allen, who they acquired mid-season last year, played great throughout the finals and everything, but she left in free agency. They also made a trade last week. Well, not even last week. It was on Monday, I think. Or
it was,
Sunday.
Yeah.
I was like, this week just feels like a million years. But they did add Carly Samuelson, which is a huge piece. And I think just kind of, with losing Hines-Allen, getting a veteran player to just kind of slot back into that spot is really great. I mean, a few weeks ago, they signed Grace Berger to a training camp contract. They signed Kristen Williams, who has been in and out of the league throughout the past few years. And then they go into the draft and they draft Anastasia Kosu from Russia, who I think is more of a draft and stash kind of pick. Then they draft Delia Daniels from Washington. And then with the second last pick in the draft, they draft Aubrey Griffin out of UConn. So just like overall, maybe just give me an idea of what you've thought of the Lynx's offseason. Again, they weren't that active, but at the same time, still making these little moves. So what did you think of all of them?
Yeah, I think when you get as close as they did to winning the finals and you have your entire starting five under contract for another year, don't overthink it. Run that five back. It worked really well. There's obviously things to be added around the margins. I really liked Myisha Hines-Allen, also just one of the best interviews in our league. And I was hoping they'd be able to retain her. Then I saw that she got, close to max money from Dallas for this year. So I'm just happy for her. Get that bag, and hopefully she's in a position to get another bag next year. The other big loss is the Italian sharpshooter Ceci Zandalicini, who Golden State took in the expansion draft, looking to have a representative from every country in the world as kind of Golden State's roster makeup right now. So Italy is a good one to include there. But Ceci was huge for the Lynx in a lot of ways. I think her biggest game was in the Commissioner's Cup final. one of 3 different Lynx who shot above 40% from 3 last year. That's definitely part of the team's identity. And was just someone who could come off the bench. You knew she'd do the right thing and knew her role. And I think Carly Samuelson actually fits more into that than what Maisha did. I think they'll probably ask maybe a little bit more of Dorka in this year. Hopefully she plays a little bit closer to her rookie year than stretches from last season. But Dorka had a great offseason playing in Italy and in some national team games with Hungary as well. So yeah, there's not a ton of movement. I think retaining Napheesa Heidemann in the backup guard spot is huge. She was a free agent, and I was kind of convinced that she'd be the one who would get too much money elsewhere to say no. Being able to, have the starting 5, and then in addition to that, Napheesa Heidemann and Dorka, that's close to 90% of the total minutes from last year. So I like all of these other moves. I'm not sure how they're all going to play. It's a pretty stacked training camp roster. Like you get, the 5's going to be there, T, Dorka, Carly's obviously going to be there. Cheryl was reaffirmed, we're bringing Carly Samuelson in to be a contributing player on this team. She's not going to have to, worry about competing for a spot. She's on the team.
Well, I mean, she's protected anyway. So
yes. So, yeah, I think it's what you kind of expect when you have a group that came that close and you have, some roster stability. They showed you could win a championship, or not win a championship. Sorry. They showed that you could build chemistry to a championship level very quickly last year. But that doesn't mean that other teams will be able to necessarily emulate that. So I don't know. I think of all that, every team is trying to catch up to them in terms of familiarity with each other. So I would expect them to come roaring out of the gates again, but they're in a pretty good spot. I do think the Anastasia Kosu pick, one of the reporters mentioned the term draft and stash in her post-draft media availability, and she kind of shut that down pretty quick. The expectation is for her to be here and for her to report due to all the bureaucracy involved in obtaining visas and the immigration process is not easy. So I don't think there's an ETA. Kosu will speak at the virtual press conference that is today, so we may learn more.
By the time you're listening to this, it probably has happened.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll learn more about it. But I think what Cheryl Reeve said after the draft was, we owe it to ourselves and to this team to put our best foot forward for 2025, while also doing the balancing act of making sure we have things lined up well for the future. And I think that's kind of, what they did in getting Samuelson, getting some young players. Daniels and Griffin are both really intriguing prospects, and ensuring that they're able to hold on to Chicago's first round pick next year, so that they do have a first round pick bite of the apple in the first round of the draft next year, depending on what that draft looks like, which we can speculate. We have no idea though, but it's always good to make sure that you're at least involved in that and have some capital depending on what happens, especially during next year's WNBA free agency period, which is already stressing me out given how much volatility there will be around the league.
Exactly. Especially because now next year, my team's going to be a part of that. Like the Toronto Temple in the, I'm going to be in market next year. All of this talk being in market.
And we'll have a double expansion draft before all of that too.
Exactly. And then you think about how we have this expansion draft, but everybody's free agent. So who knows who's actually going to sign? It's a whole thing. Which is, I'm worrying about it too early, obviously. But yeah, I think, looking at their training camp roster, I mean, there's still Diamond Miller. You have Alyssa Pilley from last year. Obviously, Dorka Juhas has been huge for them over the past few years. They also, they have so many names, so many players that have made an impact over the past few years, have also kind of struggled with injury. I mean, I'm looking at the cap sheet right now, and the draftees haven't even been put on it. So there's another 3 names that are going to be put on there. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see who ends up filling those last few spots. And I do think, especially under Cheryl Reeve, nothing's set in stone right now. Like all of
No.
those players are going to go into that training camp, and like there's no like hierarchy of like who automatically gets a spot. Like I think they're all going to be fighting for it because
Right.
Cheryl Reeve is really, really good at finding talent anywhere, whether it's in the draft, undrafted, whatever. And so I don't think anybody should have like expectations of who's going to fill out like the back end of the roster.
Right, and we still haven't mentioned French forward Marieme Badiane.
Mhm,
I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I will find out immediately after this when I'm at her intro
yeah,
presser.
true.
She played really well for the French national team. She played over at Fenerbahce in Turkey, so she's played with Kayla McBride, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's in the thick of things. Maybe filling all those Maisha Hines Allen minutes that are available. Maybe being pushing to be the first post off the bench. She's very, very skilled player and has played at a really high level and was part of that French team that pushed Cheryl, Fee, and Team USA to the brink in that gold medal game last summer. So
I was rooting for him. Yeah. So, we're going to take a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about this season coming up in literally a few weeks. If we think that the Lynx can get back to, a final spot and all of that. So stay tuned. This is Locked On Women's Basketball. Did you know that your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices. No console required, just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to play. Dive into hundreds of premium titles from EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty Black Ops 6 and Avowed as easily as you stream your favorite shows. It's gaming made simple, and it's all on your Fire TV. With 4K streaming, you can also watch over 1 million movies, TV shows, and all of your subscribed series like Netflix, Prime Video, Disney, Max, and it's also affordable. So you can play these Xbox games at a fraction of the cost than the physical games when you have a console. And you can also, the stick itself is more affordable and it's easy to travel with. You just unplug it, bring it, and plug it back in wherever you are. So, I love gaming. So it's so nice to be able to just bring the console with me wherever I go, whether I'm traveling to see my family or on vacation or going to a basketball game. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller are required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV 4K Max 1st and 2nd Gen, and a Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. All right, we are back here on Locked On Women's Basketball with Terry of the Next, and we are talking Minnesota Lynx. So we got through last season, we talked about the offseason, and now it's time to look ahead to this current season. I mean, we talked about all of the pieces that the Lynx have. They're going into a season now where, honestly, the stakes are really high. You think about the fact that this is maybe the last season that you have this core group of starters together based on the fact that next season is free agency. You have 2 more teams coming into the league. We don't know how many people are going to be able to be protected in the expansion draft, all of that stuff coming up. You also have the CBA, expiring, which I'm not sure how big of a factor that's going to be to getting people back. But anyway, all of that to say, like, this might be the last ride for this current iteration of the Lynx team. And you also think about the fact that, the New York Liberty have also leveled up since they won their championship. Las Vegas is obviously still in the mix. You have other teams like Dallas just got Paige Beckers, and the Indiana Fever, added around Caitlin Clark, and, Seattle just drafted a French dunking phenomenon. Like,
Right.
there's so many factors to keep in mind, and it's so hard to win a WNBA championship again because the league parity is so strong. So, I guess just like right off the bat, like, do you think that the Lynx can get back to the championship?
I do. If I were being asked to put power rankings together right now, I would give New York their flowers for being the defending champs and put them at 1, and I would put the Lynx right at 2, maybe
Mhm.
just a 1A. I think over the offseason, I was on a couple of different, Lynx podcasts just talking about, free agency and what are like the best, acquisitions. And, Lynx fans maybe feeling a little left out because the Lynx weren't making these, splashy moves, which it's hard to make a splashy move when you want to keep your starting 5 intact.
Exactly.
But I'm like, look at Unrivaled. Napheesa Collier looks like the best player on the planet. Fee's still getting better, which is a scary thought given
Yeah.
how good she already is. So I think with Fee playing at the level she played last year showed throughout this offseason that, she's not slowing down at all.
Mhm.
That's the biggest key. So I do think this team can get back to the championship. I think the league probably wants that, but just in case it doesn't happen, there is a mini sort of finals rematch when the Lynx and Liberty play each other 3 consecutive games. I think that's in August.
Nice.
if you're a nerd and have studied the schedule like I have, yeah. So even if it doesn't happen in the playoffs, we'll get a little taste. I can't imagine, any tempers flaring or any holdover emotions going into seeing the same team 3 times in a row. But yeah, I do think they can get there. It will be hard. Vegas will be very good again. I'm not sure how different Vegas will look with, enter Jewel Lloyd, Kelsey Plum now in Los Angeles, and the team that the Lynx had to battle through a really tough 5-game series to get to the finals. The Connecticut Sun are hitting a hard reset. So no disrespect, Sun fans, I don't expect Connecticut to be involved in the semis, but we have
Yeah.
no idea. So I do think this season it's, championship or bust is, such a, just sort of overused cliche, but I can tell from just the way everyone has gone about it. And, Cheryl said, we're going for it this year at her post-draft availability. And they were going for it last year. I think 2023 was kind of the only year where it was like, oh, maybe we're going into a rebuild. And they, of course, started 0-6 in that first season since Fee returned. But since they started that season 0-6, they still made the playoffs that year. So the record is, it's like 800 winning percentage or something.
Yeah.
So I do think the expectation is to be there in the last games of the season. And I have no reason to doubt them that they'll make it that far. So it'll be everyone else after Lynx Liberty. I think you do have some pretty significant questions. I think the Fever will be a lot better. Don't have more respect for many coaches in the game, men's or women's, and Stephanie White. How much of a leap do the Fever take in year 2 of Caitlin? But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. There's
Yeah.
definitely some intriguing competitors out there, and it's hard to play that deep into October.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think
Especially
they've got
now.
the pieces to do it.
Yeah, and now you think about a 7-game final series, which to me is wild.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I mean, yeah, you mentioned Unrivaled a little bit. Obviously, Fee played unreal and Unrivaled, like it was
Right.
wild. I kept making the joke that like she just created this league so that she could dominate it. Like
Right.
she's like, yeah, sure. But also like Napheesa Collier played amazing. I think she played for nearly every single team. She as the
Right.
player. Courtney Williams played amazing. And then you think about the other factors. We mentioned Dorka playing overseas. Bridget Carlton also had a great season in Turkey.
Yeah.
Her team made it all the way to the final and then won silver in the EuroLeague. So that, she is still getting better as well when you think about that. Their young players also, had great off seasons. Courtney, yeah, I mentioned Courtney Williams, Kayla McBride playing in Turkey. Carly Samuelson was also on the same team as Bridget Carlton, so that chemistry is already, starting to build. And then, of course, they're young players, the ones who have played in college, et cetera. So, yeah, I think they're all coming in just like really primed and honestly, like with a chip on their shoulder because of the way that last season ended and all of the controversy around, the final game and the referees and all of that stuff.
Yep.
And so yeah, like if I were them, I'd be angry too. And I'd be like, okay, we're going to get back there. We're going to try and, make sure that this time it goes right. And then, who knows what happens next year with contracts and all of that, because at the end of the day, like These players deserve to get paid. It's a business. Who knows what the CBA is going to look like in terms of salary cap and rules. I mean, also Bridget Carlton, come home to Toronto. But, just manifesting.
It's going to take 5 first-round picks for to get rid of Bridget.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that they're such an exciting team. I loved watching them last year. And I think that they, again, like maybe a little bit of a quote unquote, like boring off season, but that is just because they were already so good. Like they don't need very much to go in and succeed. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be great. I'm excited to see these power rankings start to come out in the next few weeks, where people are putting all these other teams and, start getting to the season and seeing who they keep on the roster, first of all. And second of all, like if they're able to just like move into this season as well as they ended last season. So yeah, I mean, it's exciting times in Minnesota.
And I'll end with a stat. It is very difficult to get back to the finals, and I think there's kind of a narrative across all sports where the team that loses the championship has a very difficult time getting back to it the next year. That's especially true in Super Bowls. I think that's only happened, 2 or 3 times in the whole history of the Super Bowl. In the WNBA, only 2 teams have won the finals after losing the finals in 5 the previous year. The Minnesota Lynx and the Detroit Shock. So Cheryl Reeve was a head coach of one of those teams and the assistant coach of another one. Nice. So there's some precedent set for navigating a long season with, some upset feelings stemming from last year and using that fuel in a healthy way. So we'll see if she can do it a third time.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, shout out Cheryl Reeve, one of the best coaches of all time. But
pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today, Terry. Make sure to check out Terry's work on the Next, writing on the Minnesota Lynx beat. And and of course, we'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Locked On Women's Basketball. I'm Chelsea Leite, and thank you so much for joining us.